I hope everyone's doing well. So I get asked a lot of questions about sanding and finishing, and because I put the walnut oil on with it too. So last week Jeff asked me if I could do a specific video on the sanding and finishing. So that's what we're going to do this week. Let me get the camera moved over and we will get started. Help support the companies that support our community. All right, I have a piece of walnut here. I went ahead and just trued it up. So before you start sanding though, just one quick tip. When you're turning, you can clean it up as fast as you want, but when you go to do your final pass, whether you're using easy wood carbide or regular gouges, take that last pass on it as smooth and as clean as possible. And that way you don't have to do a bunch of sanding. So you could see here, where the grains run in that direction, it's nice and smooth, and when it starts to go to the end grain, it's a little bit rougher there. So you can see, and I try to get all the tool marks out so we don't have to do a bunch of sanding. And the better that cut is, the higher the grit you can start with. I'm going to start with 180 on this one. And what I'm going to do is sand up just half of it because I want to show you that process of flipping it around. So I'm going to turn on the dust collector real quick, do a couple of grits dry, and then we'll get the oil and put some of that on it. Let me turn the dust collector on and we'll go at it. Don't forget to always turn the lathe speed down. I sand about 300 or so. Just keep the sandpaper moving the whole time. Don't just hold it on one spot and let it dig in like that. Just keep your hands moving around on it. Work it back and forth. Put your sandpaper up. Clean it out if it gets clogged up. Just keep working it like that. Alright. So, we're going to go ahead and switch grits here. And what I do a lot of times is reverse the lathe. So now it's running in that direction. Same process here though. Just keep the sandpaper moving. Just like that. And the reason I go back and forth is because if you sand it in all the one direction, it just kind of lays the grain down if you don't get it all. So just go back and forth. Like that. Alright, now I can start with the oil. Turn the dust collector off, I'll be right back. Alright, so I just ran through a couple of grits dry, and after you get past that first grit, with the first grit you want to get out any torn grain or any tool marks. You need to get those out before you move on. So just kind of inspect it as you're going, so make sure you got those out. Because at this point, after you go past that first grit, all the sandpaper is doing is sanding out the scratches from the grit before. That's all it's going to do, especially when you get up into higher grits, 320, 400, 600. All it's doing is sanding out the scratches from the one before it. You're not going to get out any tool marks or torn grain or anything. So make sure on that first grit you get out all those blemishes. So here is the oil I use. It is, hang on, grab a piece of sandpaper here. So again, I have the lathe speed down. I use Doctor's walnut oil to sand with. You probably see that in a lot of the videos. I'm putting something on the sandpaper, and this is what it is. So I only had to run through a couple of grits with all that dust and the dust collector on, and then at this point I'm going to be putting the finish on and sanding it at the same time, but the oil is capturing all of that grit in there, so there's not a bunch of dust. So with this, turn the lathe speed on, turn it down low, just drip it right on the top of it, just like that. And same thing with this, just work it back and forth. You can see it start to dry out there a little bit. If you want to put some more on, you can. Just keep it wet. You don't want to dry out too much because it will clog up the sandpaper. Just like so. And then it all kind of goes through the sandpaper and it lets the sandpaper keep going. Go ahead and I take a paper towel. I wipe all of that grit and dust off of there. All the excess oil before moving on to the next grit. So I have the finishes on there and I'm sanding it at the same time. So we'll just go through a couple more grits. Same process with this. Lathe on. You can actually reverse this if you want to too. You really don't need to once you get the majority of the sanding done because you're just sanding out the scratches from the last one. But the first couple I go back and forth. Just like that, same process here. In between each grit, so it's covered with all the dust from the grit before, or from this grit. So that is why I take the paper towel and clean all that off of there. Just like that, and you can see it just captures all of that fine dust. So I'm just gonna go ahead and keep working my way through all the way up to 600, and then we'll put a finish on it. So if you like a satin finish, which I do, I use the oil a lot, and I use that walnut oil as my finish when I'm done. But I'll put some Pins Plus on here just to show you. But if you like, a glossy finish, the Yorkshire grit works really well, and it's like a sanding paste. So with it, you sand up to 240, and then you switch over to that sanding paste, and it does the same thing. But then you can wipe it off and put a finish over the top of it. So, but we'll just use the Pins Plus on this one. And somebody asked too, how long you had to let the walnut oil dry, and I let it dry for about a half an hour. So when I get done here, I'll show you the process I do. So the walnut oil is, I'll have to read the back of the bottle, but I think it's like double or triple boiled purified walnut oil or something. But it does dry. It's not, it doesn't stay wet like something like a mineral oil. All right, so that is 400. And just move right on to 600 and finish it up. And as you go up in grit, you'll notice too, it takes a lot less of the oil to get it covered. Just work it back and forth like that. All right. So, all that wiped off of there. So, after I've gone to 600 with this, what I do is I turn the lathe speed up and just put a little bit of heat on it, and then I usually run and do something else for about a half an hour while it's drying. I turn the lathe speed up to, I'd say about 1,000 RPMs. Just kind of work it back and forth a little bit. It starts to work, you can feel your hand getting warm just from the friction of the piece turning. And I let that set up before I put on the Pins Plus. So I'll do that, and then I will come back and we will get some Pins Plus on here. And then we had another question about the transition from the top to the bottom. So we'll go over that after we get the Pins Plus on this part. All right, now that that's dry, I'm going to go ahead and put a finish on it. So again, the walnut oil works great for capturing all that dust. It doesn't let the sandpaper get too warm, so you can get heat cracks from if you're sanding too much, and it warms up the wood too fast. And it's all food safe. I really like it as a finish. I use it a lot on the smaller projects. So with that, paper towel, shake it up. It says to shake well. Apply it onto a little bit onto a rag, and you put it on with the lathe off, or the just kind of wipe it all around, and then you crank the speed up, and it's a friction polish, so work it back and forth until you can kind of see the reflection in it. It usually takes about 3 or 4 coats to get a nice finish on it, but already that's a nice satin finish. So if you're looking for that, and it's a little bit of protective coat. All right, it dries quick. It's, I don't know, about 15-20 seconds, and it's dry. So a little bit more on the rag, and then turn the lathe speed back up, heat it up. And as I'm doing each coat, you're able to see it's getting glossier and glossier. There we go. See that? A couple more coats on it. And then I had a question about flipping the piece around. That was another question, and it's related to sanding. So we'll throw that in. There we go. And because it dries so fast, hopefully you can see all that. Got a couple little dry spots right out there, so I'll put on one more coat. But it's a finish you can just keep building up. You can put on 10 coats if you want. And I usually, it does dry quick to the touch. It's already dry to the touch. But what I normally do is after I put it on, I let it set up for probably half an hour or so. Just sit on the lathe before I grab a hold of it and take it off. I'm usually doing it with like bottle stoppers or bottle openers or something, and they're on a mandrel, and you don't really have to grab a hold of it to unscrew them. So I usually let it set up for quite a while. All right. So the other question was, say this was a bowl or a lidded box. When I flip it around to do the other end of it, how do you, because you have to start sanding this part of it. So I've already sanded this to 600. I already put the finish on it, but I'm going to basically, if this was the top of a box or something, I don't want to have to touch that again, but I still need to sand all the way to this point. So what I do is I start right all the way over with sanding, and I come all the way up into here. So each grit, I just gradually keep working my way up. I don't usually go all the way to the top because it's curved around or something, but I get up way up there. So it's going to sand that finish and the oil back down, but I just keep working my way back up. So just kind of show you. If I flipped it around and started working on the you know, the bottom of a bowl or something, that was the question. But we'll just leave it like this for this demonstration. So same process here. I'm going to go ahead and run through a couple of grits dry, and then I'll show you how I just gradually work my way up into there. But I'm going to turn dust collector back on real quick and get that sanded. went ahead and sanded with the 2 grits dry, and I worked my way all the way right back up just past that transition there. And then it's the same process here, but each time I go just a little bit further so that you don't have, you know, sanding scratches from the one before up in this area where you've already sanded up to 600. So it's just kind of that process of gradually going back up over everything. All right. It is a little messy, but at least it's not all going into the air and into your lungs. So just like that. And so every time I'll just keep coming back up till we get to the top. Drops the sandpaper. All right, and that's good because I do that a lot. Well, that was good to show that too, because I do that a lot. We have to cut that out of the videos that I'm chasing sandpaper all the time. There. A little bit further. Wipe it off. Make sure you go past a little bit. This is 400 here. On this one, I'm just going to go all the way to the top with it. But if you're doing, you know, like I said, a lid box or a bowl or something, you don't have to go all the way around the corner. Especially, you know, if it's in the chuck or something like that where you can't really get to it very well. And that's why I always sand, you know, half and half like this. Because you might not be able to get all the way to around the corner of the top of something when you flip it around to take the foot off. All right, and this is 600 right here. And two, when you are, just say this with the bowl, you're sanding in this direction with all of the oil and everything. When you take it out and flip it around in the chuck to take the foot off or whatever it is, you're sanding in the other direction. So it's automatically doing that when you flip it around to get rid of the foot. So same thing here. I'm just going to turn the lathe speed up, put some heat to it, a little bit of heat to it, and then I will let it dry for about a half an hour, and then we'll come back in and put some Pins Plus on it again. All right, it's all dry, so you can see, you know, where those two lines were. You can't tell where that was anymore, and it's just gradually going up. All right, I'll just go ahead and put some Pins Plus on it, and then we'll be done with this. If you do have any more questions, just let me know, and I'd be more than happy to do a video on it. And I'll just put a couple more on just to build it up. The Pins Plus, just make sure you shake it up well every time you use it, because the stuff settles down in the bottom of it. So just make sure you give it a couple of shakes. Stuff dries really fast, so it's a nice finish to just be able to put on a few coats in, you know, in a minute or two. There we go. And like I said, just make sure that you let it set on there for I would say about a half an hour or so before you grab a hold of it. But it looks like it has a couple of dry spots, so I'll put on one more coat. Yeah, and it depends on the wood too. The harder the wood is, the more even it's going to go on. But with a walnut, where I know it's a hardwood, but it's actually a softer, one of the softer hardwoods, so it's going to soak it up differently in certain spots than others. You might have to, if it's a softer wood, put on 5 or 6 coats. And then with a really hard wood, you might get away with just a couple. But it working really fast. I really like it for doing small stuff. But like I said before too, you can use just use the walnut oil as a finish. It's food safe. You're basically sanding as you're putting the finish on too. So I really like the ease of that. As far as sanding goes, I think that's about it for the process I use. Finishes is a whole nother story. If you ask 3 wood turners what's the best finish, you're going to get 4 or 5 different answers. So finishes is a whole nother thing. I like an easy finish, and that's really why I like the walnut oil. I like that satin look. If you like glossy, there's a ton of stuff out there. The Pins Plus, it's just a quick and easy glossy finish, and that's why I like it. The only thing I really do in glossy is smaller things, like a bottle opener or something like that. As far as like a salad bowl, something like that, I always just go with the walnut oil. I like that finish, and I'm eliminating all that dust as I'm doing it. All right, I hope the video helped and you enjoyed it, and take care, have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.